Good morning on this Sunday, October 6th, and welcome to the Georgia Gang. Georgia begins the long road to recovery after Hurricane Helene tore through the state. Also, community outrage after another massive chemical fire at BioLab in Conyers. And a Fulton County judge overturns Georgia's abortion law, declaring it unconstitutional. So much to talk about. Kathy, Phil, Theron, and Martha are all here. The debate and discussion begin right now.
From the Fox 5 studios, the Georgia Gang starts now.
Unprecedented. That's how Governor Brian Kemp described the damage across Georgia from Hurricane Helene. Former President Trump was in Valdosta to talk with farmers and others impacted by Helene. President Biden and Vice President Harris also came to Georgia, promising the federal government will be here for the long-term recovery.
You've been through hell 3 in a row, and I want you to know I see you, I hear you, I grieve with you, and I promise you we have your back.
The Biden administration has worked with Governor Brian Kemp and state officials to approve a major disaster declaration for 41 Georgia counties, which allows federal aid to supplement state and local recovery efforts. Vice President Harris was in Augusta Wednesday to visit with families and hand out meals.
I think that in these moments of hardship, one of the beauties about who we are as a country is people really rally together and show the best of who they are in moments of crisis. And we've seen that throughout the region where communities are coming together. Today, I'm also announcing that the president has approved the governor's request for 100% federal reimbursement of local costs.
Former President Trump visited South Georgia Monday to witness the devastation firsthand.
Our country is in the final weeks of a hard-fought national election. But in a time like this, when a crisis hits, when our fellow citizens cry out in need, none of that matters. We're not talking about politics.
Now, Governor Kemp also suspended the state gas tax as an economic relief measure to aid Georgians, especially in rural areas that rely on generators for power. So let's run the table. Kathy, I want to start with you. You're just back from North Carolina. The destruction there even is just indescribable. How have you seen the government's response firsthand?
Well, I think the government's response, both the federal government and state and local, everybody's doing the best job they can in a terrible circumstance. I think what's really heartening to see is that, the morning after, folks were out with their chainsaws clearing roads. I saw, like caravans of electric companies from other parts of the country. I saw 10, tree removal trucks in a row, coming in from Pennsylvania. So folks are coming in and quite literally you can stop your car anywhere basically west of Spartanburg and get to work. I mean, it's that bad. And the real challenge is, like in Asheville, and I know I'm talking a lot about North Carolina, and this probably applies everywhere, that the entire water system has been wiped out. Yes. They won't have water for probably a month, in a city the size of Asheville. That's pretty dramatic. Everybody get to work. Don't go to places because they don't need more people and bodies unless you have a very specific task. But find your favorite charity. And I've been telling people here, particularly in Atlanta, go to the Red Cross and donate blood, because in all of these locations in Florida and South Georgia and North Carolina, the Red Cross centers are probably wiped out, and there's going to be a big need for that. So, if you don't have money or, you don't have the ability to do a little extra, just go donate blood and it'll be helpful.
That's a great point. Phil, here in Georgia, the death toll stands at more than 30. We know that continues to increase. We know Augusta, a place where you and I have spent so much time, hit so hard.
Well, you're right, and it's a shocker, and it's saddening. People are still missing. The death toll will rise. It'll take months, even years, according to our state officials, to have some of these areas recover. And I think it mirrors some of what Kathy is saying in Augusta. It's a tragedy. It looks like a war zone. I still have friends. I know, Lori, you do too. I had about 4 friends that were almost killed in homes where trees were crashing onto it. And last week, I know we praised a lot of the first responders, and rightly so.
Yes.
I don't know if we added the Department of Transportation road crews, and Russell McMurray, the commissioner. They have done a great job in Augusta, especially. There's not enough poles for electricity. Yes, there's still water and electricity out in that area. Valdosta, of course, got hit. I was glad that Franklin Graham and Trump went there, and I'm glad that obviously the president and vice president came here, although I disagree with Kathy. I think the federal response has been terrible, and I'm very upset. And Governor Kemp was visibly upset on Thursday when he couldn't find Biden at first, President Biden, and he had to call the White House, the chief of staff, and say, look, the emergency relief order did not extend to all of these counties that are hurting and people are hurting, and that should not have happened. And then FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, is broke. Why is it broke? Mayorkas, the Homeland Security had said that on Thursday. It's broke because they siphoned off millions of dollars to help illegals relocate.
Darren, let's talk about some of these damage estimates that are coming in right now are just at $500 million and expected to increase exponentially. Governor Kemp has said that he hopes that more counties will be added to this federal emergency declaration. We're early on. There's still a lot more work to do, and there's still a lot more declarations to do.
Absolutely. And look, the president was very clear that he hears the community, he hears them, he feels them, and he's going to do everything in his power to make sure that Georgia gets the necessary funding they have. And so as we tape, there are conversations being had right now about making sure that we bring more federal funding here. The thing that was reported this week, and I was so happy to see our 2 U.S. senators, Ossoff and Warnock, themselves going and tour the damage, but their staff, a lot of them were calling a lot of people in the community to say, hey, can you donate to particular cities? And the other thing I want to announce is that, you see all these good neighbors, right? And what DeKalb County has done is it launched this Good Neighbor Express, where Michael Thurman, literally as we're taping it, down in Augusta with 5,000 lunches. To Phil's point, I talked to a lot of folks in Augusta that had not eaten for 3 days. People are still without power. A lot of folks came to Atlanta, and so I also want to echo what Phil said as far as DOT, but just continue to really praise Georgia Power and the EMCs as well, because they're working around the clock. Many of these women and men, these frontline workers, these line workers are not sleeping. And then lastly, look, I really respectfully push back on Phil. That it was a lot of rumors out there that the Kemp could not get in contact with the president. It may have been delayed, but I know that the federal government and everyone who's responsible for this region and the 2 U.S. senators and the congressional delegation were all in lockstep to make sure they plan for this relief.
But Kemp had to ask for more, and he finally got it.
Well, the governor, as you know, Phil, look, he is going to ask for more, right? And this is one of the things I want to praise the governor. The governor was out there before, during, and after. But
and
then,
Mrs. Kemp.
And Mrs. Kemp, right? But to try to say that they haven't responded and then to infer that they maybe don't care, I think it's just a little disingenuous.
Go back and look at the governor's video on Thursday.
Well, Martha, the Georgia National Guard also has deployed about 2,000 members to assist with recovery efforts. I mean, this is when folks help one another, neighbors helping other neighbors. But what more would you like to see?
Well, and I was glad they did that. The president did announce 1,000 National Guard coming in, but from what I understand, they're sitting waiting for orders. So the 1,000 are there, they're sitting waiting for orders. I'd like to see, I would really like to see, first of all, more opening up the ways for these private people to help, because I personally think private people are going to get there quicker, they're going to do it more efficiently, and they're going to get it cleaned up faster. I think it's better, and we need to make sure we vet that. Also, I was very concerned that after the president had a fairly good press conference for him about this, when he came back to the White House that night, they asked him about the storm, and he said, what storm? He seemed to be confused about where he had been, and they have him on audio answering this question. We're going to do everything we can, and everybody's happy with what we're doing. So we need to make sure it's more coordinated. I'm glad the congressional letter was sent out with the Democrats and Republicans united from Georgia saying that we needed these things. That was a very positive thing. And honestly, I don't like these dueling visits where you've got Democrats going here and Republicans going there. This should not be a partisan issue. People should be going together and working together, and hopefully we'll see more of that.
Kathy, so many folks are comparing the destruction that we're seeing in North Carolina and Georgia, and even our farmers to the south, right, in Valdosta and other places, to Katrina. Like, this is how bad the destruction is. What do you think the lessons learned from Katrina are being played out here now? Like, what have we learned, and what are we?
Well, I think we haven't learned a lot, right? I mean, you can call it climate change, you can call it global warming, you can call whatever you want, but we're going to see more and more of these kinds of things, and it's going to cost us more and more. It's a national security issue, not just something that helps people, hurts people individually. And so we have to start thinking as a country about how we're going to deal with that, because the expense is going to be there, the loss of life is going to be there, and it's not going to stop until we make some radical changes in this country. And I think that's a discussion not to have today, because we have, emergency situations going on that have to be dealt with. But I think we have to really talk about, what happens to our food supply, what happens, how much money can we afford to pay out to rebuild on coastal areas. Those are policy decisions that have to be talked about, and now.
Phil?
Well, I don't disagree with some of the points you're making, and I think the governor made this point too, and that we really haven't dealt with anything like this in Georgia's history. Apparently, it is a second type Katrina, and I think preparation is important. That's what he stressed. Whether it comes to, stock up on water, fill up your gas tank, have enough food for 48 hours, some of the things you mentioned. And I think, though, just to stress my point, I think that the federal government was a little too slow here, and I want to know why. And I think Democrats and Republicans, they all ought to be asking, how come we're so slow here? Because there's people still in need.
They had that united letter from Democrats and Republicans. They agreed the federal government response was too slow, and it was the entire delegation.
No. We said that in Katrina. We said that with Michael. We always say it's too slow because you want the help there when you wake up the next day.
But the state and locals were pretty quick in private.
The state and locals should be pretty quick. They are right there. They should be pretty quick. Here's what we have to do is make sure that Congress fully funds the effort right now. Yeah. Quit playing politics.
No, I agree with that.
I would agree with that. Quit talking about did you get there an hour early or an hour late, and let's just get to work.
Yes, I agree. Let's leave it there because that's a good place to stop. And where everybody agrees. Up next, another major story to discuss: the chemical fire at Biolab in Conyers, which has impacted all of Metro Atlanta.
Have a question or comment for the Georgia Gang? Email them at georgiagang@foxtv.com.
Frustration spreads to the state capitol as several lawmakers call for Biolab in Conyers to shut down for good. Now, this comes as a chemical plume was still shooting in the air after a chemical fire 1 week ago. Martha, this is such a disaster. Schools in Rockdale County this week are now virtual. In 2004, when I was at WSB in Channel 2, I covered that initial one, and it was a mess then, forcing thousands of people to evacuate, and we haven't learned anything from this.
No, we haven't learned anything. These types of chemicals that they work with are very volatile, and if they're not handled right, you're going to have the tragedy that you've just seen. I mean, we dealt with it in Gainesville a few years ago, where but it was a freezer plant that had a leak, and a lot of problems happened related to that. So look, schools are going to be out. It's going to be virtual this week. It is just horrible. So it's got to be dealt with now. We cannot, and I'm not opposed to people being capitalists and producing these kinds of chemicals and making these kinds of products, but they've got to be 100% safe in how they do it.
Yet there, and Congressman Hank Johnson said that there have been several unreported incidents from the company, and that Biolab has a history of being cited and not complying with regulations and not doing the right thing.
Yeah, Congressman Johnson was pretty vocal this week in his disappointment and outrage on what happened. And then, you also saw a lot of local leaders come out and call for the plant to be closed. And that's their First Amendment right. I mean, that's what, some politicians have done. But, I took a moment to really talk to a lot of folks on the ground. And I want to start off by praising all the women and men that have kind of really come together to mitigate this emergency. It's a disaster. And I think the company, it feels terrible. They feel really, really bad, about what happened. And I think that Chairman and CEO Oz Nesbitt, Rockdale County, has been leading this effort. He is immediately on the site to try to corral everyone. This is going to be a multi-jurisdictional sort of relief package. And so I think that right now, Lori, when you really look at it, public safety and public health has got to be paramount. Then you got to make sure that the community feels very safe and knowing going forward. And then it's going to be really left up to Biolab, which I know they're going to do, is that to be very transparent about the next steps and to be open. They've been working in coordination with the fire chief and updating the public. And so it's happened. It's a disaster. It should not happen. I know the company and the residents feel very, very bad about what is going on. So you'll see this continue to evolve, but ultimately I think that that we got to all come together as good neighbors again to really fight this crisis.
Well, you're being very nice, but how many times are businesses going to have to close in that area? Schools, people having to shelter in place. I mean, what can be done?
Well, you're making a very good point, and yeah, I'll praise Hank Johnson. That's a rarity for me, but he did the right thing. But I'm going to criticize Oz Nesbitt, who's the chairman of the County Commission in Biolab. We're all supposed to be for transparency here, and the first couple days, the company just issued a terse statement that meant nothing, and then you couldn't hear anything. Even the AJC was frustrated in trying to get some information out of this. And 4 fires in 20 years. This is a terrible record. I want to hear more from the company, but I'm in favor of shutting it down if they don't explain more what they're doing to remediate this.
Kathy.
Well, you said it, 4 fires in 20 years. I think it's time for them to go. They are way too close to an urban area where there's a high population. I don't know if it's better to put them in a rural area where there's not. I don't know who would want them.
Right.
But at this point, I think they have got to shut down from where they are. We can't continue to. And we've had 20 years. That's a whole generation that's getting exposed multiple times to this toxic stuff.
Well, I'll just remind you all, and I'm not disagreeing, but there are a lot of jobs there, right? And what's got to be focused on again is the community, public safety, public health. They need to know that it's safe to go outside, to make sure that there's a plan in place. But when you start talking about shutting down companies, there are a lot of women and men who depend on this company to feed their families. And so I know the company has got to think about, what do you do in this time of distress? It was reported that those folks are going to get paid.
Well, you got to do the right thing.
You got to follow
OSHA regulations.
About the jobs, where's the plan?
And where are the OSHA regulations and following and reporting incidents and doing the right thing? That's
I mean, look, this is definitely all fair, but I just want to make that point.
Okay, I want to move on to some politics, because this week Governor Tim Walz and Senator J.D. Vance took to the debate stage. What I liked about this debate was that it was cordial. I mean, they agreed on some issues. They didn't agree maybe how to tackle some of the issues, but there wasn't name calling. It wasn't mean. It was kind of like the good old days, Martha.
Well, and I tell you what, first of all, 50 million people watched it initially because they offered it on a lot of different platforms. The viewing has got up to 80 million by the next day. So this was as well watched as the presidential debate. And I think that finally what you saw, that people got along in the Midwestern values. And I tell you, the split screen was funny to watch because Tim Walz agreed with everything that J.D. Vance said. It was just great to watch. But what I thought was even better is this was finally that pivot to the 500,000 or whatever the number is of people that are going to be deciding this election. This debate was not about their bases. This debate was about reaching out to those people that are still making their mind up, and I thought it was a win.
Theron?
When you looked at the debate, you saw 2 different styles. You saw a Yale trained lawyer, and nothing wrong with people who went to Yale, right? I mean, clearly you can see that he's been preparing for this moment all of his life, versus a governor who literally showed compassion, who showed that he was a school teacher, football coach, who's fed kids in his state, and really honestly started off a little slow. You can definitely tell there was a big state, but as he ended, and you look at the exit reports and all the focus groups, people say that he won this debate on the issues. And so, you look at how he really put J.D. Vance on the defense. J.D. Vance had to defend Donald Trump's record, whereas you saw Governor Walz really talk about a path forward. And look, he got through it. And I think that, to Martha's point, it was all about the independents in the middle. I don't think that J.D. Vance did anything to try to expand the electorate. I think independent, moderate voters saw that Governor Walz is a sensible human being who literally talked about issues, really talked about the plan, and I think did a really good job.
All right, let me play devil's advocate, because that's what I like to do. But Governor Walz also had to answer to the fact about was he or wasn't he in Tiananmen Square, Phil?
Well, that's
right.
Right.
That's where he really dodged and seemed very uncomfortable.
He was caught in a lie, even by the horrible liberal questioners, But I have to chuckle, Theron. I'm going to quote Governor Walz. He admits that he's a knucklehead. And so I don't know of a politician that actually has admitted that over the years, but I'll give him an A for candor. But no, I think Vance did a very good job. He was polished. He explained some of Trump's policies even better than Donald Trump, as a matter of fact. He knew his policy issues, whereas Walz you thought he was the head of the Chamber of Commerce of his state. His state was #1 in this and that. Well, he didn't really delve into defending the Biden-Harris policies. In fact, I thought Vance was very expert in his debate by turning it back every now and then and saying, Harris says all this, but she's been there and is doing nothing.
Kathy, you want to give us your 30 seconds?
Yeah, sure. I mean, you have to really sort of get into the details then of the policy, right? Vance repeatedly talked about we needed more manufacturing and more energy production, and that is exactly what the Biden-Harris administration has been doing for the last 4 years, bringing companies back. We produce the most natural gas and regular gas that we've ever done in the history of our country. And so, they're kind of picking on the things that the Biden administration has done successfully and then claiming, they need to do it. So I think that's an issue. And then, we haven't talked about the abortion issue. I'm assuming it's coming up next. But, related to that, we'll just get into it in the next segment.
Let's do that.
But I think that was a real fail there.
All right. Coming up, a major ruling from a Fulton County judge who says Georgia's abortion law is unconstitutional. We'll discuss next.
Join the discussion on the Georgia Gang Facebook page and watch past episodes on the Georgia Gang YouTube channel.
A Fulton County judge overturned Georgia's so-called heartbeat law, declaring it unconstitutional. The law made it illegal to terminate a pregnancy after a heartbeat is detected, which is usually around 6 weeks into the pregnancy. Kathy, I want to go back to you because we mentioned the abortion issue in the last segment, but just your thoughts on how this is going to play out in the courts.
Well, I don't know how it's going to play out in the courts. I am relieved by the rulings. Really, quite frankly, thought the language that the judge made was really interesting and really talking about the fact that women should have the liberty to control their own reproductive choices. I think what we heard in the debate was having a state-by-state policy on abortion access is just not the way a free country should operate. Where you live shouldn't dictate whether or not you actually have access to health care. And we've heard from the ProPublica report cases of 2 women in this state that died because they couldn't get routine health care that would be perhaps defined as abortion.
Martha, Georgia's Republican Attorney General Chris Carr has appealed the judge's ruling. He filed a motion asking the Georgia Supreme Court to reinstate the law.
Well, you expect him to do that, and I'm not surprised that he did that. But one point I would make is that with all the talk, the groups really just want to have their issues. And look, I'm pro-life, and I'm unabashedly pro-life. But there were 2 times the Democrats had enough votes to codify Roe v. Wade into law the way they wanted to, and they chose not to do it. One was under President Obama, and he made the choice to go with ACA and use his political capital there rather than codifying Roe v. Wade. So there have been opportunities for the federal government to codify Roe v. Wade, but they frankly would rather have the issue to talk about. But look, I think this is going to continue through the courts, but I do think the state-by-state way to do it is the better way to do it, because we have that in all kinds of medical issues where people have different services that are available in different states. One of my winners this week is going to be Benjamin Crump, who's representing Amber Thurman's family, because he actually acknowledges that it was not the Georgia abortion law that created the problem. It was the hospital, as I pointed out a couple of weeks ago, and hopefully her family's going to own that hospital.
Darren.
I think we got to really talk about the judgment, and I think Judge McBurney made the right decision. This will be ongoing. You see the Attorney General comes out right away, and it probably will go to higher courts, and it may or may not be overturned. But I want to say this, guys, is that I think ultimately the voters are going to decide what's going to be the direction of this country. I mean, we have an opportunity to go and vote for the Democratic side, who actually wants to protect reproductive freedom for women and give them the right to choose what they want to do with their bodies, and the other side definitely wants to don't want them to have that right. And so I think while the courts are going to go back and forth, ultimately I just encourage people to go out and vote. And if you want to protect women's rights and reproductive freedom, I think that the Biden-Harris coalition and the Harris-Walz campaign has been very, very vocal on where they stand on this
very
issue.
quickly, let's talk about Judge McBurney. He's been reversed several times in recent years. I'm going to predictably reversed by our state Supreme Court. Why? There's nothing in our state constitution about privacy. There's no right to abortion in the U.S. Constitution. The reason Roe v. Wade was overturned by the U.S. Supreme Court is that they said there's no right to abortion. There's no right to privacy. So I'm for the states doing it. The state legislature did this heartbeat bill, whether you like it or not. So I think it'll stand.
All right, I got to leave it there, folks. Coming up, winners and losers. Stay tuned.
Time now for the week's winners and losers.
Well, first we have to wish a very special little girl a happy eighth birthday. That's Quinn Robinson. That's Brian Robinson's daughter. She's very special to me and my family. My daughter loves babysitters. She's precious. So happy birthday, Quinn.
Birthday, Quinn.
I want to thank the staff at Fox 5 Atlanta for saving the day on Friday when I was doing my radio show. They are winners this week because they got me the equipment that I needed when mine wasn't working. I also want to make a winner, Benjamin Crump, for taking the right position on the Amber Thurman case. And just very quickly, my brother-in-law, Ray Zoller, passed away this week. He was on the USC football team for the national championship team. He was a five-star recruit and helped recruit for that team, and he will be missed greatly. A life taken too young.
Sorry.
All right, so we're going to start off with our Atlanta Falcons. Now, Phil, work with me here. We're going to do a little swag and surf like Kurt. So we're going to go to the left.
That's right.
Go to the right.
That's
all right.
We
but
got
no,
it.
shout out to the
We got it.
Falcons
We got it.
and what they've been able to do. Big win against the Saints.
It
Big
was
win
great
against
to
the Bucs.
see.
Great win. Yeah, keep it up, guys. And then
After
also
that Georgia game.
And the Braves.
I was there. Real quick, MARTA, who won the Transit Agency of the Year at the after conference, want to definitely congratulate them. It was based on strong financials and innovative initiatives. Also want to say hello to Edwin Edward, who actually saw me at the Falcons game. And then lastly, Lori, tomorrow is the last day to register to vote, so please make sure you register to vote.
Good point.
Well, I tell you what, Governor Kemp is my winner. He has done a great job over this past week in suspending the gas tax. We lost a great pillar of the business community. A.D. Frazier passed away at age 80. He was the COO of the 1996 Olympics. Great guy. World Congress Center had its 50th anniversary. Winner is Frank Poe, who's leaving as executive director, and Kevin Denning is taking over as executive director.
Oh, congrats to Frank. Wow.
My winners are all of the individuals, the churches, the nonprofits, the caregivers that have been just working tirelessly throughout the South, just trying to move forward after this destruction. So just pat yourself on the back, everybody. You know who you are. I was going to say Monday morning, last day for registering to vote. People need to do that on October 15th. It's time to start voting.
And we'll leave it there. See you next week.